Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Attention Pliss Podcast, now on video. If you like this podcast, kindly like, share, subscribe. You know what to do. So, today we want to talk about Virat Kohli leaving the Test captaincy, leaving or being made to leave. Well, before I get to that, before I get to the politics, and of course, this was all about politics, let's look at Virat Kohli's legacy as a captain um, through three different lenses. So the first lens or first metric that we would like to consider, and this is possibly the one that most Virat Kohli fans will latch themselves onto, is his record in terms of sheer numbers of matches won. And there's no doubt that if you take this as the be all and end all metric, then his legacy is second to none in terms of an Indian captain. And many of these victories have come abroad in places where we are normally accustomed to not winning. And so people might try to, detractors might try to say, but he had the best bowling attack and bowlers win matches and batsmen save games. So, it wasn't really Virat Kohli. But that's very churlish. To then, after, if the captain is responsible, then the captain is responsible for the good as well as for the bad. So you can't detract from his legacy by saying he had this team. I mean, if Ganguly had that team, nobody, it's, this makes no sense. You have the team and then you try to do whatever you get, that's your result. So for me, on that metric, yes, Virat Kohli is the best captain that India has ever had. But which brings me to the second metric, which is slightly more subjective, but not really so. It's, how many trophies does he have in his trophy cabinet? And the answer is none. Many people would say, well, that doesn't matter, but well, that's really the thing, right? It's the guy who can finish it off. That to me is the important thing. Just winning games, I mean, it's good metric. It might help you in your fantasy league cricket, but other than that, the important thing is he didn't win a World Cup. He didn't win the World Test Championship. And again, it's not his fault alone, but if we want to give him the credit, we should expect that he should take the blame also. And even in the Australia series, we won after he left the series. I mean, the test we lost was the one he was the captain in, and after he left, it was under Rahane that we won the series. And even with the England series, it's in a state of limbo. I don't think it'll ever be finished, but the World Test Championship final, he lost. So again, in terms of, this might sound like, this is not really the main thing. I'll come to the main thing, which I think is where his legacy I don't think stands up to the legacy of Dhoni or Ganguly. But in this case, this is where Dhoni leads the pack in terms of trophies won, in terms of what's in his trophy cabinet. Even now as the captain of Chennai Super Kings, where he's essentially a non-playing captain. And the Chennai Super Kings lineup also isn't the best lineup in the IPL, far from it. But he just manages to win. And this just goes to show the genius of MS Dhoni as a captain. It's remarkable. And again, when you compare then MS Dhoni to Virat Kohli, unless you're a really hardcore Virat Kohli fan, I mean, you have to accept that his legacy is nowhere close to Dhoni's in terms of achievements in the final. Let's just put it. And people talk a lot about Sachin Tendulkar in that respect. But let's come to what I believe is my real problem with Virat Kohli as a captain. It's been the way he's carried himself on the field. Now, for Virat Kohli fans, they say that Virat Kohli he's expressing himself. It's himself. He's not a hypocrite. He is being who he is. But for me, that's the problematic aspect. What we see on the cricket field, it's not a guy who's back from office playing cricket with his friends in the Maidan of his housing community. This is a professional. He's getting paid a lot of money. This is business. This is a work environment. Is the kind of aggression, often needless aggression, that he brings? And he himself has said he does that aggression to pump himself up. That aggression is not welcome in any professional context. And yes, cricket today is a professional sport. What we watch is a professional sport. This kind of behavior would not be tolerated at work, right? In any company. So how was it tolerated for years on a cricket field? Now you can say, well, there were other people who were also aggressive in bringing about Ganguly, but it was different. Firstly, Ganguly's aggression was never that Ma Behan type of aggression. It was never really shouting at the mic, which was really Kohli's last defining signature move. Even in his last test, that way he was honest at least. Um, that to me is problematic because that's not what you expect from a leader. You expect the leader to not express himself, to bottle it in, to have control of. How can you have a control over your team, whether it be at work, if you cannot have control over your own emotions? And so, if the leader, as in contrast to the individual contributor, if the leader brings their own very, I would say, overflowing with energy, and energy is not of a positive nature, then I think that just creates a problem. And it's not just been, it's been, one of the things that I will always remember is him sledging Surya Prakash Yadav. This guy is going to be playing with him. And it's okay to say, you know what, when we're in the same dressing room, we are friends. When we're in the opposing dressing room, we are enemies. It doesn't really work like that. Human beings don't work like that. When you get into somebody's face and you can't then, especially if you're his contemporary, it's fine. But if you're his captain in the side and you have the authority, whether he gets into the side or not, it becomes very difficult for people to actually work. Knowing fully well in a place like IPL that next time if I return his compliments, I might not get into the side. So this is why you need to have a captain like Dhoni. Did Dhoni like everybody? I don't think so. But Dhoni never gave it. He had a control over his feelings as much as he could, and that to me is the hallmark of a great captain. That's the hallmark of a great leader. A great leader is somebody who keeps the emotions under control at all points of time. There could be some places where, the mask shifts. But it's not a bad thing to wear a mask. It is not a sign of being disingenuous to wear a mask. If you don't want to be a leader, if you want to be as you are, then don't try to be a leader. But he wanted to be a leader, and again, even when you look at his resignation letter, it's very obvious that he didn't want to leave. So he still wants to be a leader, but you cannot be a leader if, in a game, if something goes against you. And again, these kinds of things have gone in India's favor too. Famous Syed Ajmal's decision against Sachin Tendulkar is you shout into the mic. That's not aggression. That's not aggression, in my opinion. Aggression is, when you're, as an example of aggression, I would say Sachin Tendulkar. And people often don't remember Sachin Tendulkar's aggression, but the Australians stopped giving him verbals and stopped giving him verbal abuse because they realized that he didn't react to it because he didn't care. It just steeled his resolve, and so they stopped. There was a time when they used to, but then they stopped and they said you can't. They realized that it was counterproductive to sledge Sachin Tendulkar. That to me is aggression. He doesn't need to shout. And Virat Kohli again is at that level. He's not a Devang Gandhi in batting. He can show it in terms of his games. He's one of the greatest Indian cricketers ever. So why does he need to? And I would come back to one of this. This happened in the 2011 World Cup, where I think it was Rubail Hussain who was bowling, and he was not the captain then. He defended it and said, ball kar, something with abuse. Why did he need to do that? The Bangladeshis weren't sledging him at all. They were sledging nobody. But he felt he needed to do that to kind of boost himself up, to kind of give himself a jolt of electricity. For me, there's multiple things problematic with that, especially when that person becomes a captain. Which brings me to the last thing, is that even though cricketers will always say we don't want to be role models, but the thing is they are. At least when I was growing up, I learned a lot from watching. It's not something which I consciously imbibed, but I realized that I was learning things. How we played our game in the afternoon was absolutely a function of what we saw on television. So the fact is that for a generation of players, this is what they have seen, is that if things don't go your way, just shout, run, make a feature go like this, do whatever you want. That there's no lagam. that there is no control. And the fact is, Kohli could do this because he had his manager a cipher, essentially a sock puppet, which was what Ravi Shastri was. Which now finally brings me to the politics of it. Now, I read or I saw that Sunil Gavaskar was saying that this was going to happen with the South African series. Foreign losses are usually bad for a captain. The thing is, first of all, and this is perhaps a credit to Kohli, is that even the fact that we're talking about this as shameful, as something that should lead to the captain being removed, is perhaps Kohli's biggest legacy. I mean, India going to South Africa and losing only 2-1, we should be proud of that. Why are we ashamed of it? So the fact that we're even thinking on these lines is perhaps Kohli's biggest legacy. Now, the thing is that this wasn't the kind of defeat that Dhoni suffered in England, where India had their asses handed to them, match after match, match after match. This was a close-fought series, where India basically, it was on a knife's edge. There were 1 or 2 sessions that India could have won that they lost. They had 2 out-of-form batsmen. Whatever it wasn't that kind of a defeat. No fans were demanding a change in captaincy. No, and especially even more so because Kohli had a fairly decent series. I mean, I watched some of the batting. He looked confident. Again, he didn't score a century, but these were not those kinds of pitches. When he played with confidence. So I don't think that this was not the point of time when you would expect Kohli to face this kind of pressure to resign. No, I think this was already preordained. He was told that either he was, and this is again my conjecture, that either he goes himself, he resigns, or he's no longer the captain after this. And this was evident. Like, I don't think that any kind of sustainable strategy will have multiple captains for multiple forms of sport. Even more so when the captain when this person who's been removed plays in all 3 forms of the game. Like if Quentin de Kock, for instance, it's not a problem anymore because he's not playing Test cricket anymore. But if a person is playing in all 3 forms of the games, you can't at that point of time suddenly remove him forcibly from captaincy of 1 or 2 of them and keep him in 1. It is a recipe for groupism, for insecurity within the team. So it was obvious that there was going to be an uniform, whether it's the same person or whether it is all decided by the same person is another thing. But it was obvious that they were going to make a clean break with the past. And the writing was on the wall when Rahul Dravid came. I mean, Rahul Dravid was reluctant to take this position. And it's very obvious that the reason why Rahul Dravid took this position, given what Kohli did to Kumble, it was obvious that Rahul Dravid's vision, anybody who's seen Rahul Dravid knows that his vision of what captaincy is and what player behavior is does not gel with Kohli's. And it was fairly obvious in the South African series that Kohli didn't change anything. He was essentially himself. So there was no way hell would freeze over before Rahul Dravid would work for a long period of time with Kohli. So it was fairly obvious that when Rahul Dravid came in, he was told that Kohli was on the way out, that he wouldn't have to work with Kohli, that he had the full freedom and independence to create a captaincy cadre of his own. And that's exactly what is going to happen. Whether it's going to be the same captain across all 3 forms, KL Rahul, or whether it's going to be split between Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul for some time, ultimately transitioning to Pant, I don't know. We can conjecture it in some other podcast, but for now, this should have surprised no one. I was pretty sanguine that this was going to happen around this time. If they had won the series, would he have gotten another series? I don't think so. I think this was the time. I think Rahul Dravid now wants to take control. So the last thing was I had made a tweet, which many people asked me why I had made the tweet. When Kohli left, I said, people don't leave their jobs, people leave managers. And it's true, right? Because, and who are you supporting? Are you supporting Kohli? Are you supporting Ganguly? I'm supporting no one. I was trying to make a point that Kohli is not really leaving his job. It's fairly evident that Kohli doesn't want to not be the captain of India. He wants to be the captain of India. Even in his Instagram resignation letter or whatever that was, it was very clear that this was not a decision that he was making from the core of his heart. He wasn't walking away from this. It was fairly evident in his letter. So, but he's leaving because he can no longer work under this management. The management can't work with him. He can't work with the management. It's not because of I guess his record. It's just because of who he is, and it's because of the philosophy that he brings to captaincy, which I just believe doesn't really gel with the way Ganguly and Dravid want things to run. It was different. I mean, they tried with Kumble, it didn't work, but this time they have decided. And the reason why it worked with Kumble was at that point of time, Kohli was at the height of his batting. He was like the '98 Sachin Tendulkar. And when you're playing at that level, whether on the cricket field or at work, you're basically untouchable because of the level of productivity you build. So you can basically do whatever you want. But unfortunately, everything you do will come back to haunt you when your performance dips a little bit, because you've run roughshod over a lot of people. And that's exactly where the politics of it comes into play. So do I think that finally did Kohli deserve to go at this point of his career? No, perhaps not. Perhaps there was more left. But I think it's for the better. I think that now that let's see where Rahul Dravid takes Indian cricket. And with Kohli, it's important that he rediscover his form. I still think, and it's not a question of I still think, he's definitely not batting at the level that we know Kohli can bat at. Now, it could be that the Kohli at whatever age he's 31 or 32 is no longer the Kohli that we remember him as. It's like the Sachin of 2003 and 2004 wasn't the Sachin of 1998, and that his game has evolved. We'll have to expect less things from him, but he'll still be the best batsman in the side. That could very well be the case. Or maybe he will transition to a different type of batsman, as Sachin Tendulkar did in the later ages of his life. And definitely, Virat Kohli is a great batsman. He can definitely do that. So it'll be very interesting to see how he evolves once the captaincy is off him. It will be interesting, and I think this is ultimately what I believe is good for Indian cricket. Thanks a lot, and hope to see you in the next episode of the podcast. Bye-bye.